Meaning is the holy grail of learning. Simply put, without meaning, there can be no learning. The role of the teacher has to shift from a deliverer of data to a creator of an environment where the child feels that the information being delivered is meaningful and which they have an emotional connection to. If the emotions are there, the meaning is there, the learning will be there.
To start off grade 8 this year, we sat down and we discussed the benefits and maybe some of the challenges of potentially doing a very large integrated project that would involve math, science, and humanities. We started by giving the students a scenario. And so the scenario involved them having to build a permanent roller coaster structure for the Calgary Stampede. Phase 1 and 2 primarily focused on gaining background knowledge, finding out what the kids already knew.
They learned a lot about general roller coasters that are around the world. They established and created databases, and they continued to develop a timeline of a history of roller coasters.
In phase 3, we primarily focused on math science end of it. And so they were doing a lot of experiments, learning acceleration and how things drop and what changes when things are higher or lower, when they use heavier marbles or these kinds of things.
We needed to understand different things for our roller coasters before we actually jumped into it. We want to learn how it would flow and how to mark down our potential and kinetic energy.
So what's allowing you to stay in?
That was really a good principle to learn when we were actually building our models, because we needed to know when it would have the most energy to keep going through any other obstacles that we could throw at it.
So why is it important that we learn concepts before we learn details? It's really important. When you set up concepts, concepts act like a landing pad. They act like a foundation of which details can attach themselves. Understanding this really will accelerate the ability of the teacher to get children to remember details.
And then we moved on into the fun phase, as I'm sure the students would like, and that was actually building and designing their roller coasters.
We put together lots of checklists and matrices and things like that for students to track where they were at in the process. And by doing that and by keeping them busy and, always having the next thing ready, we really found that the students took over.
It was an amazing experience to see them move from this, us telling them, extrinsically motivating them, to them coming in ready to go with their things they needed and ready to work, which is that change of actually intrinsically wanting to be learning these things in order to make their project that much more effective.
When we were planning, we had to figure out different side views, bird's eye view, every detail that you would want in a roller coaster. So from there we had to draw the different elements, which would include corkscrews, drops, pretzel turns.
Students were given the ability to use the materials that they felt were the best for their particular roller coaster.
I find I learn better when I actually do stuff than having to read it then memorize it, which is exactly what this project did for us. It made us really think things through, and if it didn't work, we would have to solve the problem. The textbook wouldn't.
We learn so much easier when we're intrinsically driven than when we're extrinsically driven. What's the difference between extrinsic motivators and intrinsic? Intrinsic motivators are driven by meaning. You naturally learn what's meaningful to you. I can select in information much quicker because it's meaningful to me. And what happens is I can take that information and be much more innovative with it.
In phase 5, for the panel, they were in groups that we formed as teachers based on roles that they had selected. They got to choose to be an engineer, an architect, or a public relations person.
We got a panel of Stampede representatives to actually come to the school, and we had to basically market our models that we had made in groups of 4. I ended up choosing engineer because I felt that math was probably my stronger suit in this unit. I ended up doing a lot of graphing, touch-up work on the actual poster board.
The motivation was high because they were doing a role, whether it was the architect or the public relations person, that they wanted to do and that really interested them. it was nice to see that as a result of their choice, they were really successful in the end. The basis of this learning experience, the reason why we did roller coasters was we were hoping to tap into an interest level with the kids and into their experiences.
We figured that the best way to learn about roller coasters would be to actually take them to a roller coaster.
We actually had a few kids in our group that had never been on a roller coaster up until this point, so instantly in their minds they were starting to think about, oh, what's this going to be like?
One of the things I've never done in my life is rode a roller coaster.
Not in a million years would I would have thought that the school would be going to West Ed for 3 hours just for roller coasters.
When we got there, it was the first ride we went to, and I was really excited. And the minute we started climbing up, I'm like,
What would you rather have happen in your children's brain? Would you rather fire only 5% of neurons in their left temporal lobe, like language does? Or would you rather fire more neurons throughout their whole brain? Why is this important? Because this is so much more effective than locking them in a little box and then telling them to memorize something.
What we found was after they had spent all of this time learning and experimenting and building roller coasters, now actually being at an amusement park and analyzing a roller coaster, the meaning just skyrocketed because now they're looking at things from a design perspective, they're looking at it from a function perspective, as well as they're looking at it from a marketing perspective, that if my roller coaster, the one that I've designed, was at this park, would it survive?
it was probably the best day I've ever had through school. Like, I can't even, it was something else.
It was such a unique experience as a teacher to get to see these few students that come off the roller coaster all shaky and with the adrenaline pumping, and it was just a really good opportunity for the students to experience a roller coaster, and I know that it helped them sell the idea of their roller coaster that much better.
The more neurons that fire in their brain, the more learning that happens, the more memory that happens. So the closer you can make the classroom environment like the real world environment, the more learning your students are going to achieve.